Imagine you open your eyes and the first thing you feel is cold. It is not the controlled chill that comes from an air conditioner, nor the draft of a poorly heated room. It is a damp cold, one that sinks into your bones and slips through every gap in the poorly fitted wooden walls of the small room where you slept. There are no glass windows, only planks, and if you are lucky, an animal hide hung up to slow the airflow a little. The low, dark roof is made of beams and straw, and it creaks with every gust of wind. You take a deep breath, and then the second blow hits, the smell. A dense, penetrating blend of smoke, manure, and unwashed bodies. The smoke comes from the central hearth, where a weak fire smolders more than it warms, soaking everything with a sour, lingering scent. The manure comes from both the animals and the streets, and the bodies. Well, no one here bathes daily. It is a normal smell for those who live in the era, but for you it is so strong that, suddenly, the cold stops being the most uncomfortable thing. Around you, you hear coughing, dry coughs, deep coughs, the coughs of children and adults. It is the background noise of the Middle Ages. Winter has left more than a few people ill, and the damp and the smoke do not help. Between those coughs, you hear animal sounds, a pig grunting, a rooster crowing out of time, and right beside the bed, a couple of hens pecking at the packed earth floor. It is not unusual. In many peasant houses, the smaller animals live indoors to protect them from the cold and from thieves. You get up, or rather, you try to get up. The clothing you find is not the cotton t-shirt and comfy pants you are used to. Here there is wool, thick, coarse wool that itches against your skin and has never seen detergent. Underneath, if you are lucky, a linen shirt, also without softener or ironing. The shoes are of hardened leather, rough, and they tie with straps that dig into your ankle. You step outside. There is no metal door or doorbell, just a wooden board that squeals as it opens. Outside, the streets are not paved. They are nothing but mud, mixed with puddles and an unpleasant mosaic of dead animal remains, organic waste, and garbage. Here, the idea of a cleaning service simply does not exist. Neighbors throw the contents of their chamber pots out the window, and if you are unlucky enough to be passing at that moment, you will find out firsthand. With each step, your boots sink into the cold mud. Every so often, a stone or a bone juts up to the surface, and you feel the crunch beneath your sole. The smell in the streets is stronger than inside the house. To what you smelled before are added the stenches of the market, the workshops, and the stables. Animals roam free. Goats, skinny dogs, a donkey tied up with whatever came to hand. All of them leave their traces, and we do not mean only footprints. The greatest danger, however, is not visible at a glance. The puddles and stagnant water that line the paths are a magnet for mosquitoes, rats, and fleas. These tiny intruders are not just annoying, they transmit deadly diseases. In a world without antibiotics or vaccines, a bite or a nibble can be the beginning of the end. Bubonic plague, which in different outbreaks has killed more than 1/3 of the European population, is transmitted precisely by rat fleas that live in places like these. Your modern instinct tells you to get out of there, to look for a clean and safe place. But in the Middle Ages, that place does not exist. The closest you will find is a church where the air does not smell as much of garbage, but does smell of wax and tightly packed bodies. Around you, people go on with their routines, women carrying buckets of water from the well, barefoot children chasing hens, men pushing carts piled with firewood. No one seems fazed by the mud, the smell, or the danger from rats. For them, this is day-to-day life. For you, who have been here a few hours, it is a brutal collision with a reality you did not imagine to be so hostile. And if you think going for a stroll to explore the village is a good idea, wait until you see what awaits you at the market, where the food is as dangerous as any armed enemy. You continue along the village and reach the center, the market. It is the busiest place, and at the same time, one of the most dangerous if we are talking about your survival. The first thing you notice is the bustle. Vendors shouting their wares, haggling at the top of their lungs, the clink of copper coins. The second blow is visual. The stalls have no display cases. There are no sealed packages or refrigerators. Everything is out in the open, in full view, and within reach of flies, rats, and dirty hands. You approach a bread stall. The loaf they offer is dark, almost black, made with rye flour or unrefined whole wheat. It is not fluffy, but compact and hard. Hidden within its crumbs are tiny pebbles from the millstones used to grind the grain. Eating this bread not only wears down your teeth, it can literally break them. And in an age without modern dentists, that can mean infections and serious trouble. A few steps away, meat hangs from hooks. There is no ice and no refrigeration. The sun or the winter cold are the only preservatives. Some cuts already show a suspicious color. Others are covered with cloths to disguise the flies buzzing around them. The smell is strong, and the butcher assures you it is fresh meat, although the truth is, it may have been hanging for days. The fish is no better off. Brought from nearby rivers or from the coast, it has traveled without proper preservation. What is not salted or smoked has a dull look and a penetrating odor with nothing of the sea about it. Even so, it is what there is, and it is better to eat it than go hungry, although that bite could end in a long night of fever and abdominal pain. As for something to drink, your options are just as limited. The water comes from wells located near latrines, stables, and dumps. The concept of aquifer protection does not exist. A bucket of clear water can, in fact, be full of invisible bacteria that cause dysentery or typhoid fever. That is why most people prefer to drink small beer or watered wine. Fermentation kills part of the pathogens, and although these drinks are low in alcohol, they are consumed at all hours, even by children. In England and in the Low Countries, small beer was the usual breakfast drink, and in some parts of France, watered wine formed part of the school menu, so to speak. If you were a peasant, your daily diet would be repetitive and modest: bread, oat or barley porridge, and a watery soup made with cabbage, turnips, and if luck was on your side, a small piece of bacon for flavor. Meat was a luxury reserved for festivals or for the days when something was hunted. Fish, except in coastal regions or near abundant rivers, was not common on a peasant's table. The nobility, for its part, could afford banquets. However, that did not mean eating better in terms of health. Game, pork, beef, or poultry could be served spiced not out of culinary refinement, but to mask the taste of early decomposition. Nobles ate large amounts of fat and drank wine in abundance, which led to problems such as gout, kidney stones, or chronic digestive issues. Gluttony was a sign of status, and moderation a rarity. Foodborne illnesses were a constant threat. Dysentery, caused by bacteria present in contaminated food and water, could cause severe dehydration in a matter of days. Intestinal parasites, tapeworms, roundworms, were common, and ergot poisoning, a fungus that grows on damp cereals, could trigger hallucinations, convulsions, and even death. This last phenomenon, known as ergotism, is documented in historical outbreaks that affected entire villages and was so devastating that in some places it was called St. Anthony's Fire because of the burning sensation in the limbs. To grasp the scale of fermented drink consumption, historical records are revealing. In medieval England, an adult could drink between 2 and 3 liters of small beer a day, which easily added up to more than 1,000 liters a year. In wine-growing areas of France, average wine consumption could exceed 150 liters per person annually. This was not a whim, but a necessity. In a world without microbiological knowledge, alcohol was, paradoxically, a safety measure. As you walk through the market and look at what is within your reach, you understand that in this place, eating is not simply nourishment. It is playing Russian roulette with every bite and every sip. The locals know it, but their bodies, toughened by years of exposure, tolerate things that would send you straight to bed, or worse. And as you think about this, a man beside you coughs hard, bends toward the ground, and spits something that is clearly not just saliva. Welcome to the next challenge, falling ill in a world where medicine can be more dangerous than the illness itself. In the medieval world, the line between life and death could be as thin as the edge of a knife, or a splinter poorly removed. A simple cut on your hand while working the land could be the start of an infection that, without modern treatment, spread up your arm in a matter of days. The redness turned to swelling, then to fever, and finally to gangrene that left no option but amputation, if you survived the operation. In the village, the figure of the physician as we know it today scarcely existed for most people. The few doctors trained at universities worked for nobles, clergy, or wealthy merchants. For the rest, Healthcare was in the hands of local healers, monks, or barber surgeons. The latter, recognizable by the red and white striped pole that still marks barbershops today, cut hair as well as pulled teeth, lanced abscesses, or amputated limbs. Their tools were knives, razors, and saws, and there was no anesthesia beyond a swig of wine or biting down on a piece of leather. The pain was indescribable. A tooth extraction, for instance, could fracture part of the jaw or tear gums, opening the door to deadly infections. In amputations, the risk was even greater. Even if the patient survived the shock and the blood loss, the chances of the wound becoming infected were very high. The remedies used at the time ranged from superstitious to frankly dangerous. It was believed that powder made by grinding Egyptian mummies, the so-called mumia, had healing properties, and it was prescribed to treat everything from hemorrhages to stomach pains. Animal blood, applied to wounds or ingested, was another popular treatment, as was the use of human or animal urine as a disinfectant due to its slight ammonia content. Far from curing, these practices often worsened the patient's condition. When plague struck, medieval medicine was completely overwhelmed. Bubonic plague, transmitted by rat fleas, could kill in a matter of days. In the great pandemics, such as the Black Death of 1347, entire cities lost more than half their population in a few months. Doctors wore long waxed robes and beaked masks stuffed with aromatic herbs, believing they filtered the miasmas or poisonous vapors that, in their view, spread the disease. Leprosy was another scourge, causing disfigurement and driving the sick to be isolated in leprosaria, where they spent the rest of their lives apart from society. Typhoid fever, spread through contaminated water and food, manifested with high fever, abdominal pain, and a progressive weakening that could last weeks. In all these cases, the most common treatment was bloodletting, drawing blood from the patient to balance the humors of the body, a practice based on medical theories inherited from antiquity and completely ineffective against infections. Childhood was especially vulnerable. Infant mortality reached staggering levels. 1 in 3 children did not reach 5 years of age. The causes ranged from infectious diseases to malnutrition, household accidents, or complications during childbirth. Mothers, without access to adequate medical care, depended on midwives whose experience varied enormously from one region to another. Medieval chronicles are full of accounts of cities devastated by epidemics. In 1348, for example, Florence lost about 60% of its population due to the Black Death. In London, cemeteries filled so quickly that mass graves were dug to bury hundreds of people a day. In some cases, entire villages were abandoned, with fields left untilled and houses empty, because no one was left alive. In such a world, falling ill was not just a health problem. It was a sentence that could isolate you from your community and put you in the hands of treatments as painful as they were useless. Survival depended as much on your physical strength as on sheer luck. And if you think you could avoid sickness by working and keeping active, get ready, because medieval work is nothing like what you know. It is the next test of endurance. In the Middle Ages, your workday does not begin when an alarm rings, but long before the sun peaks over the horizon. The roosters crow, the murmur of restless animals, and the piercing chill of dawn pull you from a light sleep. There is no option to snooze the day. Survival depends on every hour of work, and wasting time is a luxury no one can afford. If you are a serf or peasant, your life is marked by the cycle of the seasons. In spring, you sow. In summer, you tend the crops and harvest early. In autumn, you gather what remains and repair tools. In winter, you try to survive on what you stored. Each day means walking long distances, hauling water from the well, carrying firewood, feeding animals, and working the land with rudimentary tools, often inherited and already worn. Plowing a field without modern machinery means pushing a wooden plow drawn by oxen, feeling the mud under your feet and the constant pain in your back. Urban trades are no less harsh. If you are a blacksmith, you spend the day surrounded by heat, sparks, and smoke, hammering red-hot metal with heavy hammers. Each blow resonates in your bones, and muscle fatigue is constant. Miners work in narrow tunnels without proper ventilation, breathing dust and gases that slowly destroy their lungs. A collapse can kill you instantly or leave you trapped in the dark. Fishers, for their part, face rough seas without precise charts or reliable weather knowledge. An unexpected storm can capsize the boat and lead to a quick death by drowning or hypothermia. The notion of workplace safety does not exist. There are no helmets, gloves, or harnesses. There are no laws obliging a feudal lord or an employer to compensate you for an injury. If you slice your hand deeply or break a leg, you cannot work. And if you do not work, you do not eat. In the best case, your family will try to support you. In the worst, you will end up begging in the square or depending on the charity of the church. If we compare this physical effort with modern life, it is like spending several hours a day in a gym doing high-intensity training, but without showers, without rest, without motivational music, and above all, without the option to stop when you are tired. And this is not a temporary regimen. It is the routine every day of your life. Days off are scarce. Most festivities are tied to the religious calendar: Christmas, Easter, the day of some patron saint. On those occasions, work stops partially, but even on feast days, animals must be fed, the fire lit, and basic tasks maintained. Real rest, the kind we associate today with free time, practically does not exist. And though rural life and artisanal trades were hard, the nobility also imposed burdens. A serf had to work not only his own plot, but also the lord's lands without direct pay, handing over a portion of his harvest as tribute. Urban guilds, for their part, demanded long days from their apprentices, who could spend years on basic tasks before learning the full trade. This life of constant effort leaves little room for leisure or self-care. There are no vacations, there are no weekends, and any mishap, a storm that wrecks the crops, an accident in the workshop, a bad catch, can put your entire livelihood at risk. And when night comes, the exhaustion is so great that there is hardly energy for anything but sleep, in a shared bed, without heating, and with the uncertainty of what the next day will bring. If you think work is the hardest thing you will find here, wait until you face medieval justice, a system in which your life could depend on a trial as absurd as it was brutal. In the Middle Ages, the law was not an abstract concept that protected everyone equally. It was a set of rules imposed by whoever held power, whether a feudal lord, an urban magistrate, or a distant monarch. And those rules could change according to the region, the time, or even the judge's mood. Crimes that today we would consider minor could cost you dearly. Stealing a piece of bread in times of scarcity, for example, could end at the gallows, or, if the judge was merciful, with the amputation of a hand to make it clear to everyone that the punishment for theft was as permanent as it was visible. In many cases, the sentence did not seek to rehabilitate the guilty, but to terrify the rest of the community so that they would not follow the example. Medieval towns and villages had exemplary punishments carried out in public. The pillory, a stone or wooden column in the center of the square, was used to display the condemned, tied up and exposed to mockery, insults, and often the projectiles of neighbors. The stocks immobilized feet and hands, leaving the prisoner for hours or days out in the elements. Public flogging, for its part, was carried out in markets or squares, and each lash not only marked the skin, but the person's reputation forever. Violence was not limited to official sentences. It was part of daily life. An argument in the market over the price of a sack of flour could end with knives drawn. Family vendettas, often passed down through generations, led to ambushes and murders even in times of peace. And during wars, which in the Middle Ages were frequent, looting, rape, and slaughter were almost inevitable, both by enemy armies and by unpaid mercenaries. Traveling beyond city walls or far from the village center was risky as well. Roads were plagued by bandits and highwaymen who, armed with swords, daggers, or simple clubs, attacked merchants, pilgrims, and peasants. When night fell, the chance of meeting one of them increased, and it was best to reach a safe place before dark. There were no police patrols as we know them. Security depended on local militias or on the feudal lord himself, who rarely protected everyone equally. Public executions were among the most attended spectacles. Curiosity, morbid fascination, and a certain idea of social justice mingled there. Hanging, beheading with axe or sword, and even crueler methods such as burning at the stake or the wheel were carried out before crowds who came as if it were a fair. Executioners, far from being marginal figures, were recognized officials whose work required strength, technique, and above all, cold blood. Feudal justice had an absolute character. The lord of the territory could be judge and executioner at the same time. If someone offended him, or questioned his authority, he could order immediate punishment without the need for a formal trial. This meant that the law was deeply tied to personal power, and that the rights of the accused depended more on social status than on the truth of the facts. A peasant accused by a noble would hardly have a chance to defend himself, while a noble could avoid the death penalty by paying a fine or handing over part of his property. In this context, living without falling into disgrace was almost an art. You had to avoid making enemies among the powerful, not attract the attention of bandits or guards, and take care not to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Because, in the Middle Ages, justice did not always seek the truth. Many times, it sought only to impose fear. And if you think you could dodge legal dangers by keeping a low profile, there was still an obstacle just as deadly: the constant wars and conflicts that could lay waste to your village from one day to the next. In the Middle Ages, you did not need an armed enemy to put your life in danger. The environment itself seemed determined to finish you off. The weather could be as merciless as any sword. Winters were not mild. They could freeze rivers, leave villages isolated for weeks, and trigger famines by ruining food reserves. In those months, the cold slipped through every crack in the houses, and lighting a fire was not always enough to keep warm. In the coldest regions, sleeping without several layers of wool and hide could mean not waking up the next day. Summers, by contrast, brought droughts that cracked the earth and killed entire crops. Without artificial irrigation, a dry year could mean hunger for an entire region. Failed harvests affected not only peasants. Hunger sparked unrest in cities and increased robberies on roads and in markets. Homes, built mainly of wood and roofed with thatch, offered little protection from the elements. The wind could rip off part of the roof, and a strong storm could seep through the walls. But the greatest risk was fire. A spark from the hearth, a poorly placed oil lamp, or even lightning could catch the roof, and in a few minutes destroy an entire house. In villages and urban neighborhoods where homes stood very close together, a fire could devastate dozens of dwellings before anyone could contain it. Inside the houses, smoke from the chimneys soaked walls, clothing, and lungs. Without an efficient ventilation system, spending hours in that environment was stifling and, in the long term, harmful to health. Clothing did not offer much relief either. Made of coarse wool or heavy linen, it was uncomfortable and soaked through easily in the rain, which increased the risk of hypothermia. Footwear, often made of untanned leather, warped with moisture, and did not truly protect you from mud or icy water. To this constant discomfort was added the silent plague of parasites. Lice, fleas, and bedbugs were inevitable companions, even for the nobility. Limited hygiene and close living with domestic animals favored the spread of diseases such as typhus. Fleas, in particular, were vectors of bubonic plague, while rats lived comfortably in stables, granaries, and even kitchens. And if all this were not enough, nature sometimes unleashed its fury with sudden disasters. Floods could sweep away fields, animals, and homes. Prolonged droughts forced mass migrations. Storms could sink entire fleets, and urban fires, common in medieval cities, could reduce whole neighborhoods to ashes in a matter of hours. In such a setting, strength, skill, or prudence were not enough. Survival depended as much on physical resilience as on the ability to adapt to the unpredictable. Thus, after walking through this imaginary day in the Middle Ages, it is easy to understand why surviving there was not just a matter of luck. It was an act of constant resistance. Every dawn was a victory, and every night you made it through was a small triumph against a world that offered no respite.